my channel, or welcome back to my channel. My name is Andy, sometimes Mouse, and I talk about books and book-related things, and today I am giving you the worst books of 2023 bracket battle. Much like the top books that I posted last week, I am going to be putting them here on the side of the screen instead of drawing out the actual brackets, mostly because the lighting is bad and I haven't figured it out, and I talked about why in the top books. If you are new here, then I have to give the inherent disclaimer that all of this is just my opinion. If you enjoyed these books and hate that I have put them on this the worst books of the year for me list, then I'm sorry, but again, all opinions are subjective, so you may like a book that I did not like, I may like a book that you did not like, and that's okay because opinions make the world a great place, and that's part of being human, right? It's having a subjective opinions about shit. Anyway, let's go ahead and start with our first two together. We have Valley of the Dolls by Jacqueline Susan, which I read in January, and Hunger of Thorns by Lily Wilkinson, which I read in February. Valley of the Dolls was a 2-star read, and Hunger of Thorns was also a 2-star read. Valley of the Dolls I didn't enjoy because it was really boring, and it felt like nothing really worthwhile happened at all. I recognize that this was supposed to be sort of a reference to kind of the rich and famous anyway, and their social lives and the way that they get famous, and it was supposed to be like a fictional book about real people. But because it is so old, I obviously did not know any of these people. There was none of that taboo drama for me. And it was honestly just sad. I don't understand why people reference this. Oh, it's very Valley of the Dolls. No, it's not. Nothing that I've ever seen referenced as, oh, it's very Valley of the Dolls, aligns with this. Maybe it's because I haven't seen any like media, movie, TV, etc. that might be the same as this book, but I felt this book was really boring. A Hunger of Thorns was a bit confusing, but via the era that it was in. I didn't understand if we were in a alternate world wherein we were in the present with like cell phones and stuff, or if we were in an alternate world wherein we were in the past with no cell phones and stuff. It was very confusing, and it felt like even the author wasn't super sure which era things were supposed to be in. Also, there's a weird, the way that this author talks about redheads is fucking weird. It made me very uncomfortable, and I didn't enjoy it. I was very uncomfortable with the way that that was done. Of the two of these, which ones did I dislike the most? I'm gonna have to go with A Hunger of Thorns, and that is because I actively disliked it. Valley of Dolls, I was just kind of meh about. I wasn't like, oh, I hate this book, it should never be referenced, I don't understand why it's a classic. Okay, I don't understand why it's a classic, but like, I didn't actively hate it. A Hunger of Thorns, the whole time I was reading it, I actively hated it. I think the only reason I finished it was because I had it as an advanced reader copy, and I wanted to successfully finish it. So the winner of this round is A Hunger of Thorns. Next, we have A Cruel and Fated Light by Ashley Shuttleworth, which I read in March, and Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, which I read in April. A Cruel and Fated Light was a 2-star read, Little Fires Everywhere was a 2-star read. I should have DNF'd either one of these, honestly. Could have DNF'd either one of these. Would have been fine. My life would not have changed. A Cruel and Fated Light had too many outfit descriptors and not enough plot. There was nothing relevant until about 75% in. There was a lot of etiquette lessons that I didn't give a fuck about. I know that the first book had a really hard time with the plot picking up until later in the book, and then it was really, really good. Unfortunately, this book, the plot didn't pick up, and then by the time it finally did, it wasn't that interesting. I also, transparently, did not read these books for the boys. I didn't care about the boys' relationship. It meant nothing to me, and it became a bit of the focus in this second book, and that I didn't read it for them. I read it for the scary sword lady that's on the cover of the first book. So, didn't enjoy this. Little Fires Everywhere, nothing actually happens, and rich white people be doing rich white people shit, and I actually don't know how we managed to make a fucking movie about it because it fucking sucked. What are you doing? What are you doing? I had no expectations for this and was bored to death, bored to tears about how nothing was happening. I had high expectations for this and was deeply disappointed, and now I will not finish the series because it was so fucking bad. So which one was worse? That's the question. I think I'm gonna have to go with The Cruel and Fated Light because it was so irritatingly upsetting that I'm not gonna finish this story because I would rather die than read another one of these books. Like, I'm not putting myself through that again. And also because of how bad my memory is, I frequently have to reread books. So if I wanted to read the third book in this series, I'd have to read this book again, and I don't want to. I'd rather die, honestly. Next, we have The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, which I read in May. And then we have What the Neighbors Saw by Melissa Adelman, which I read in June. Grace of Kings, I rated 3 stars, and What the Neighbors Saw, I rated 2 stars. Grace of Kings was honestly not too terrible. There weren't enough women in the books, and I don't really enjoy reading about men, apparently. And it was honestly just too long. The issue is that it was genuinely just too long. Not enough interesting things happened, and I'm not the intended audience, I think, for fantasy books of this length, especially if you don't have enough interesting female characters, which this book did not. What the Neighbors Saw, the characters were really, really boring. The mystery took a back seat throughout the entire thing, and I almost DNF'd it 80% in because I genuinely just didn't care. I didn't care about the mystery. I didn't care about who the bad guy was or any of those things. Like, this is a thriller that I straight up was not thrilled by and did not care about. Of the two of these, obviously What the Neighbors Saw is going to be the worst book because this other one was a 3-star read, and I felt it was too long, but maybe wasn't built for me, so I didn't actively hate it. So What the Neighbors Saw is going to be the one that I disliked the most. Next, we have The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes by Suzanne Collins, which I read in July, and Tell Me I'm Worthless by Ashley Rumfitt, which I read in August. The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, I rated 3 stars, and Tell Me I'm Worthless, I rated 1 star. I think this is kind of obvious which one's gonna win, which one's gonna be the worst. I felt like The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes either should have been 50% shorter, or the amount of time spent on certain parts of the book should have been different. Some parts should have been shorter, some parts should have been longer, etc. I didn't super care about the end of the book. I felt it was rather boring, and I felt like we could have had more information about the Hunger Games themselves rather than Snow's love story, because, like, a boy gets broken up with in high school one time and he makes it everybody else's problem, you know? Like, that's not news. Very standard. Super didn't like the romance. My notes just say, fuck President Snow, and yes, I'm watching the movie. Haven't seen the movie yet, but I'm interested in it just because I enjoy the Hunger Games books so much. That's why I've read this book twice. Tell Me I'm Worthless. So, disclaimer, yes, trauma and horror can merge, and they often do. And they often do in fantastic ways. I think Eric LaRocca is a great example of that. There are several other books that I've read that are horror books that I feel do a really good job of this. This book is not one of them. Also, queers can be terrible, and I think that they should be represented as both good and bad. They can have horrible things happen to them, and they can cause horrible things to happen to other people. I think that it is fair for both. Queers are just regular old people like the fucking rest of us. Me, I'm queers, in case anybody wasn't sure. However, this book has no moments of reprieve. There was what felt like no hope. The terribleness felt like it added to nothing. I was so, at first, jarred by the edgy terribleness that when the plot was happening, I was so disassociated at that point that I just didn't care. It was genuinely exhausting to read, and I don't enjoy books that feel like that. The other book that the only other book that I could compare this to was probably Juniper and Thorn and possibly Jawbone. So this book is not for me, and I think that there needs to be like a second, secret, third category of horror of like, book is just fucking depressing the whole fucking time. Book is depressing the whole time. Nobody experiences joy. Everyone here is bad. Bad things are the only things that happen in these books. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's a cadence to horror that should occur, and these books don't fit that cadence. So, Tell Me I'm Worthless is going to be the worst book for sure of the two of these. Next up, we have 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James in September, and Jawbone, which I just talked about, by Monica Ojeda in October. This was a 1-star read, and this was a 2-star read. I have a whole video about my 50 Shades of Grey reread, having reread them as an adult. I recommend you go watch it if you want to see how much I hated these books. I genuinely think that they should not have been published. I think that if this was the way that your standard vanilla women were being introduced to BDSM, oh my god, bad. Just bad all the way around. It romanticized domestic abuse very heavily, and I hated that. Also though, like all of those things aside, the prose in general was super bad. Shit should have stayed in the drafts. Maybe not even been posted on a fanfiction website because the prose was horrible. Our main character won't even curse. It makes me crazy. Like holy crap all the time, and I can't. I just can't with that. Jawbone, much like what I just talked about with Tell Me I'm Worthless, it was trying too hard to be edgy, which led to it being a jumble of kind of badly executed ideas. This one I actually was able to follow the plot. It just had too much going on in an attempt to be super edgy. I think that if I read it as a teenager though, I would have enjoyed that a lot. I can see why people would have enjoyed it. I can see that. It just wasn't for me. The parts that did make sense were incredible, and the writing was really fantastic. The prose in this is great. However, it just, again, was too many ideas that didn't execute well. So of the two, it's going to be 50 Shades of Grey inherently. This book was fucking horrible. Like, all three of them were super bad and should not have ever been published. Ever. Ever. Next, we have Garden of Earthly Bodies by Sally Oliver, which I read in November. And then we have Chain Gang All-Stars by Nana Kwame Adejebringen, which I read in December. I rated Garden of Earthly Bodies 3 stars, and I rated Chain Gang All-Stars 2 stars. I think 1.5 stars, if I'm being honest, but 2 stars. Honestly, Garden of Earthly Bodies was just boring. I felt like it was boring. I was bored. As much as being buried alive is scary, I didn't feel scared. None of this felt scary. Even the, I don't know, it felt very Seven Perfect Strangers, which was a good book, but like done badly. Like this book was done badly. I don't know how else to explain it, but I was bored. Would I read it again? No. Would I read it if I had literally nothing else to read? Like I had gone through my entire TBR and I had this marked as like a maybe read. Would I read it? Sure. That's kind of how I explained it to my cousin. I was like, it wasn't bad enough for me to say don't read it, but it wasn't good enough for me to recommend it. Chain Gang All-Stars, and I'm going to try not to go on a full rant about this, but it was super disappointing. It was super, super disappointing. And a lot of people recommended it to me, and with good reason. I also want to disclaim for everybody that recommended it to me, you were correct. This is the kind of book I would deeply, deeply enjoy. However, the conversation that this is facilitating is a conversation around abolition and how the American prison system is one, a business, and two, bad, which, of course, and I think those conversations are very important. And what this book was attempting to do was very noble, and I am grateful that fiction authors are trying to do something like this. So all of that out of the way, there were so many short story vignettes throughout the book that it distracted from the main plot, so much so that 75% in, I was still struggling to put together what the actual main plot was. We had entire chapters dedicated to someone watching the prison battle show thing. Just watching. That's it. Just watching. Nothing. And I understand that that's to show like violence begets violence, but why? I think that this could have been executed better if those short story vignettes had been taken out and put as extras at the end, bonus chapters, side stories, short stories in between, like Shauna McGuire does with the October Day series, right? She has all these side stories about side characters that are not inside the book, like throughout the chapters, because otherwise that distracts from the main story, which this does. There were too many named characters as a whole because of the short story vignettes, and that was very frustrating to me as somebody who has memory issues. I really struggled to read this. It caused I would say that from an accessibility standpoint, that's a bit of a struggle, and I know that's on me. Like, I could have written all of the names down and all of the relationships, but again, because there were so many short story vignettes, it was hard to know who was important enough for me to even do that. There was too much in this book that simply added too little. I know that in the reviews some people complained about the footnotes. However, I fucking love footnotes. I think they're great. But if I had not already educated myself on so many of the facts in the footnotes about abolition, it would have been even more overwhelming, because there are footnotes about the fictional story and then footnotes about real history, and it would have been hard to tell the difference between the two, which I think is a little bit the point. Like, is this fictional or is this actual real life prison? Like, which one is it? Oh God, how come we don't know? Because prisons are so horrible, right? I get that. But it was so much information that if I did not already know which ones were real life facts and which ones weren't, I would have DNF'd the book. Which is really disappointing. It makes me really, really sad to say that. And I think you can probably guess which one I'm gonna have to pick as the worst book of the month. And that was gonna be, or of these two, and that's gonna be Chain Gang All-Stars. And again, thank you to everyone who recommended it to me. You were right for that. It's just this book wasn't for people like me who have severe memory issues, I think. All right, we've got our final 6, so let's break them down. Okay, so our first 2 for the final 6, we've got A Hunger of Thorns and A Cruel and Fated Light. I think I can honestly say A Cruel and Fated Light because I'm still very bitter. I'm still very bitter that I'm not going to be able to finish this series because I will not read this book again. Like, I just won't. So, cool, that was easy. Bottom books are so much easier than my top books. My top books are so frustratingly difficult to do. What the Neighbors Saw versus Tell Me I'm Worthless. Tell Me I'm Worthless is going to win on this one also. Super easy. I genuinely think the only reason I didn't DNF this was because I was listening to the book while I was working and I didn't have enough time to move over, stop, and return the library book. Like, if I had been not busy and listening at the same time, like hands busy, then I probably would have stopped this and DNF'd it. So I think that inherently means that it wins that round. Then we have 50 Shades of Grey versus Chain Gang All-Stars, and this one's also really easy because at least Chain Gang All-Stars had a mission and was pretty, like, what they were attempting to do was noble. 50 Shades of Grey fucking wasn't. What the fuck is that? It's romanticized domestic violence. That is not it. Horrible. Now that's our top 3. For my top books, I did not pick the best book of the year because I couldn't pick between the 3. When it comes to the worst books, I've got A Cruel and Fated Light by Ashley Shuttleworth. We've got Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. And we've got 50 Shades of Grey by E.L. James. And I actually think that I could pick the worst book of these, and it would have to be Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumfitt. I know, you were probably thinking 50 Shades of Grey, and as bad as 50 Shades of Grey was, and as much of a negative cultural impact I think that it had, I had fun making fun of it. I at least could have lighthearted conversations about it. Tell Me I'm Worthless, unfortunately, was so heavy and without reprieve and not recommendable that I didn't want to even talk about it when I finished it. I was like, I just want to pretend I didn't read this and move on with my life. So that's going to be the worst book of the year. It's going to be Tell Me I'm Worthless. So there you have it. Again, as I've said in the beginning, these are all just my opinions, so if you don't agree, I am so sorry. If I've offended you or whatever, I'm sorry. If you enjoyed the books that I didn't enjoy, that's fine. If you didn't enjoy any of these books, I would love to hear about it. Or if you enjoyed them and want to tell me about why you enjoyed them in a nice way, you're more than welcome to tell me in the comments down below. But that is it for my worst books of the month. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe and share. If you didn't enjoy this video, I'm sorry. Luckily, I only make them once a year. I post videos on Tuesdays and Thursdays every single week at 10 a.m. Central Standard Time, except for the first full week of the month, wherein I only post a vlog, because content breaks are important. Yeah, you can find me on all the social things down below, and look out for my 2023 wrap-up, because that is coming out next week. So I will talk to you guys later. Don't forget to take your meds, drink your water, and do something today to take care of yourselves. Okay, thanks, bye.